Why can't mermaids be real? Well, firstly, they would freeze and struggle to survive in the frigid ocean waters. Brrr! You know, those skinny Disney types would turn into icicles. The truth is, the human body isn't built for prolonged aquatic adventures. I mean, come on, who wants to hang out in bone-chilling depths? Sure, there are warmer spots near the ocean surface, but if mermaids wanted to set up shop at the bottom of the deep blue, things would get frosty real quick. Water temperature drops like a pop balloon the deeper you go. So what would a cold-resistant mermaid look like? Hairy and big. Imagine a super fuzzy aquatic mammal or an extra plump mermaid rocking the underwater fashion scene. Not exactly the image we had in mind, huh? Secondly, they just can't cherry-pick body parts like in a mythical buffet. Mammals and fish play by different rules. Fish don't have the warm-blooded hairy vibes that define mammals like us. It's like trying to merge a human with a fish. Evolutionarily speaking, that's a big no-no. Our human lineage and the fish clan took different paths long ago. They're distant relatives, like that cousin you see at family reunions and awkwardly wave at from a distance. And don't even get me started on digestive dilemmas. Fish and mammals have completely different plumbing systems. When you imagine a mermaid with a mix of mammalian digestive powers and fishy hindquarters, well, things just don't add up. Let's dive deeper and separate fact from fishy fiction. If mermaids needed to swim up to the surface for a gulp of fresh air, they'd require a blowhole instead of a regular nose and mouth. You know, just like our crocodile friends with their handy nostrils. Breathing underwater ain't no easy feat, my friends. Now, if mermaids were all about that aquatic life, they'd either need gills that they curiously lack, or another clever way to supply themselves with oxygen. Marine mammals have evolved anatomies that allow them to survive those lengthy oceanic excursions. Human divers, on the other hand, have their lungs shrunk in size when they go deeper due to the pressure. Some whale species have special rib cages to protect their lungs during such moments. Plus, they've got that fancy myoglobin stuff in their muscles and blood, which loves to cozy up with oxygen. Mermaids would need something similar in their toolkits. Now, let's not forget about those gangly human arms and fingers that serve us so well on land. Hello, pizza time. Sadly, in the water realm, they're not ideal. If mermaids had been around longer in evolutionary terms, maybe their arms would have undergone some serious makeover. If mermaids had a lengthier evolutionary history, those arms would need some adjustments, that's for sure. Unless, of course, there was a good reason for their existence. Maybe their environment would require them to be food-gathering aficionados rather than speedy swimmers. So you see, the mixture of human and marine anatomy may offer the worst of both worlds. The challenges remain even if we reverse things, with human legs at the bottom and a fish head on top. Hey, want to kiss the girl? No. Gills for easy breathing? Handy indeed. Yet, what about those exposed human parts struggling to withstand the ocean's wintry charms? The Fiji mermaid was a curiosity that gained popularity in sideshows during the 19th century. It consisted of the torso and head of a juvenile monkey sewn onto the back half of a fish. This peculiar object was presented as the mummified body of a creature believed to be half mammal and half fish, resembling a mermaid. P.T. Barnum, the renowned showman, acquired the mermaid and exhibited it in his American Museum in New York in 1842. The mermaid's appearance, described by Barnum himself, departed from traditional depictions of mermaids as attractive beings. Instead, it was described as an ugly, dried-up creature frozen in a painful-looking pose. It was another hoax promoted in those times. I know, this sort of breaks the spell. But if the water is going to get dangerously cold, then realistically, mermaids would spend some time fattening up. Basically, they would look like sea lions. It all comes down to the freezing temperatures of water at some point. This made me ask, what if the ideal place for these ladies was underground caves and Arctic waters? Well, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, mermaids discovered a wondrous secret in the deep ocean depths, where sunlight could barely reach. In this realm of imagination and possibility, they stumbled upon a hidden underground springs and caves adorned with intricate coral formations. These enchanting locations held a secret that would forever change their underwater lives. As the mermaids ventured deeper into the mysterious subterranean world, they were mesmerized by the shimmering light refracting through the crystal-clear water. But it wasn't just the ethereal beauty that captivated them. It was the realization that these hidden springs and caves offered more than just aesthetic charm. These subterranean water systems were connected to vast underground reservoirs, providing a bountiful source of fresh water. The mermaids reveled in the tranquility of this land. The gentle sound of trickling water soothed their spirits, while the soft glow from bioluminescent organisms illuminated their path. News of the subterranean springs and caves spread among the mermaid community, and soon these sites became cherished gathering places. Mermaids would share stories and songs, their melodious voices echoing through the caverns, creating an atmosphere of joy and enchantment. There was another place where they could live happily, the icy Arctic and Antarctic regions, where frost and snow reigned supreme. In this realm of imagination, the mermaids had evolved to thrive in the extreme cold, defying the expectations of the underwater world. Their resilience and remarkable abilities allowed them to navigate frozen environments. In these frigid waters, the mermaids revealed their wondrous adaptation to the icy domain. Their iridescent scales glistened like ice crystals, shimmering with hues of blue and silver that mirrored the frozen landscapes around them. They possessed an innate ability to regulate their body temperature, enabling them to withstand the biting cold and icy currents. To navigate through the frozen terrain, the mermaids developed special features. Their tails transformed, bearing a majestic combination of sleekness and strength, resembling the magnificent flukes of the Arctic whales. With each flick, they propelled themselves effortlessly through the dense icy waters, moving with a grace that mesmerized everyone who saw them. Within this frozen wonderland, the mermaids found solace and purpose. They became the guardians of these icy realms, nurturing delicate ecosystems hidden beneath the frost-covered surface. Okay, well, maybe the story is just one version of how reality could unfold, but we do have real-life mermaids in our world. People admire these creatures so much that they create events and communities to swim together while wearing costumes. In the UK, there is a mesmerizing mermaid who is admired by a lot of people. Her name is Hannah Caddick, also known as Mermaid Torva, and her tale showcases the vibrant colors of the local sea life. The Portland Week event is organized to raise funds for an environmental group, and Hannah, who resides on a nearby houseboat, is part of the growing community of mermaids in the UK. Like other mermaids, Hannah uses a monofin, a large single flipper that propels her through the water. These monofins can be quite expensive, with silicone tails costing over £2,000 and often being meticulously handcrafted. So, would you consider getting a tail and joining this community? Or would you prefer to be a spectator and watch them from the shore? And here's a short useful fact. Nowadays, when we hear the word siren, we often think of mermaids. But let's not forget that sirens were there to blur the line between life and the beyond and to serenade everyone with an utterly irresistible song. While plenty of water-dwelling temptresses are out there, the sirens were the real deal. They lured sailors. But mermaids aren't the same as them. Mermaids are enchanting and nice creatures. And these days, sirens are what you hear when fire trucks, ambulances, and police cars drive by on their way to help someone.
Glamorous lifestyle, posh cars, and all those Dolce Vita attributes are tightly associated with Hollywood. But no matter how luxurious this star lifestyle may sound, there's always the flip side of the coin. The secrets the movie industry hides can sometimes be blood-curdling. But I can expose the darkest sides of showbiz for you. The picture's up. Tom Cruise has an ace up his, not exactly sleeve, that helps him nail those jaw-dropping stunts without needing a stunt double. Turns out, it's all thanks to his trusty G-string thong. Tom Cruise rocks a saucy thong to stay flexible and unrestricted as he takes on baddies, leaps out of planes, and does all those crazy action sequences. Hey, if it works for him, more power to him. At the end of his career, Marlon Brando definitely took a laid-back approach to memorizing his lines. He was known to sneak a peek at cue cards hidden around the set, like when he had his lines scribbled on the back of baby Superman's diaper. And in The Godfather, he taped his lines to other actors' chests and maybe even used a sneaky cat to hide a cue card during a memorable scene. Urgent bathroom breaks can seriously mess up anyone's plans. They can be especially uncomfortable if you're an actor that has to perform stunts. Ask Harrison Ford about it. He had a health condition while filming Raiders of the Lost Ark. Because of constant powder room trips, he couldn't shoot a big sword fight scene. It would take way too much time without breaks. Instead, we got that awesome moment where Indy just shoots the swordsman. The Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz was wearing an actual lion pelt. That costume was no joke. It was so heavy and uncomfortable, poor guy. The Wicked Witch of the West wasn't just wearing any old makeup, she was slathering on some green, copper-based makeup that was seriously toxic. Once her makeup was applied, Margaret Hamilton couldn't even eat. All she could do was drink something using a straw. The director of The Exorcist, William Friedkin, was all about getting real reactions from his cast. He'd pull out a shotgun and fire off blanks out of nowhere, scaring the pants off his actors. He just wanted to see genuine fear. That's a dedication to making a creepy film, right? Those bees in Candyman were the real deal. Poor Tony Todd had to deal with them buzzing around during scenes where they came pouring out of his mouth. To film this creepy scene, they used 500 bees to fill his mouth. Those were 12-day-old bees, so their stingers weren't as powerful. Plus, Tony was covered in special pheromones, so the bees thought he was their queen bee. Even with all that protection, he got stung 23 times, but he received an extra grand for each sting. In the movie Casablanca, they used forced perspective for the iconic airport scene, but it wasn't filmed outside as it may seem. There was no way they could fit in a real plane indoors, so they created a small plywood plane model and hired little people as extras to make it look full-sized. With the help of fog and soft focus, the illusion was complete. Humphrey Bogart rocked some serious lifts in his shoes to stand taller than Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca. He was a bit insecure about his height because Bergman was an inch taller than him. You may think it's not a big deal, but Bergman would wear heels in the movie, and she was towering over him in some scenes. So Bogart had to wear these massive platform shoes just to compete. Isla Fisher had a close call while shooting a stunt for Now You See Me. She was stuck in a water tank while chained up and almost drowned. There was supposed to be an emergency switch to drain the tank, but she couldn't reach it because she got tangled in the chains. And to top it off, nobody realized she was in actual danger because they thought she was just acting. Thankfully, she was able to free herself and finally activate the switch in the nick of time. The Blair Witch Project marketing team went all out to trick people into thinking it was a real documentary. Found footage movies are fictional, but they pretend to be real documentaries shot by the characters. The Blair Witch Project was one of the first of its kind. It's about 3 students trying to make a documentary about a witch in Maryland. Things get crazy in the woods, and by the end of the movie, they vanish, leaving only their footage behind. The marketing campaign got so intense with fake reports and posters that some people actually thought the actors had disappeared for real. Filmmakers always have to get creative when showing vehicles and devices that don't actually exist. Take, for instance, all the funky props in Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, some explosions in the movie looked just like those old-school Echo mics we used to play with as kids. The prop specialist just used the upper part of the toy and spray-painted it to get a natural-looking result. Michael Keaton's Batman outfit in Batman Returns was rocking some seriously cool kicks. The boots were actually modified Nike Jordan 6s, painted black and decked out with shin armor. And get this, they kept the original sole with the Jumpman logo. Did you know that Janet Leigh, the actress who played Marion Crane in Psycho, was so spooked by her character's shower scene that she avoided showers at all costs? Yep, she only took baths after that. If she really had to shower, she had to make sure every possible exit was sealed and kept a close watch on the door the entire time. Can you blame her? That scene was intense. So get this. In Titanic, Jack totally goofed and told Rose to chill on the bed instead of the couch while he was sketching her. Turns out, Leonardo DiCaprio slipped up and just went with it. Director James Cameron thought it was hilarious and kept it in the final cut. Classic Leo. Henry Cavill's filming for Justice League and Mission Impossible 6 clashed, and Paramount straight up banned him from shaving his epic mustache. Warner Brothers had to drop a cool $25 million to CGI that stash out of the movie. Can you imagine the special effects team freaking out over that? In the 2002 Spider-Man movie, it took a whopping 156 tries to nail a seemingly innocent scene. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker comes to the rescue of Mary Jane after she takes a tumble in the school cafeteria. Her lunch goes flying, but Spider-Man swoops in, saves the day, and catches everything on her tray. And get this, no CGI was used at all. It was all Maguire making the magic happen. Kirsten Dunst confirmed that there were no tricks, just Maguire's impressive skills, and maybe a little help from a tray glued to his hand. When Alan Rickman took that epic fall from Nakatomi Plaza in Die Hard, he was totally duped by the stunt coordinator. Picture this. Hans is dropped from the tippy top of Nakatomi, actually the Fox building in Century City, California. Rickman actually did the stunt himself, but here's where it gets juicy. He was basically pranked. The stunt coordinator held him with a rope and said he'd be released on 3, but pulled a sneaky move and let him go on 1 instead. So that look of fear on Hans's face was totally legit. Rickman was shook, just like how Picerni wanted. Rickman even admitted that he didn't remember the countdown, but he had definitely felt the adrenaline rush from doing the stunt. Jim Carrey wasn't just acting as the Grinch. That guy was literally transformed into a walking, talking sourpuss with all that makeup and prosthetics. It was so intense on set that even the special effects makeup artist had to seek for specialized help after working with him. Now that's method acting. Roll credits.
The future holds self-driving cars and flying taxis. In the past, however, we've transported a cat through an underground suction pipe and it survived. Here's how it's all connected and why we humans don't travel in tubes. So this American company named Hyperloop promised for years it would transport people incredibly fast through a vacuum system. Its ambitious plans included rapid trains, capable of traveling at speeds of 700 miles per hour. By comparison, the passenger trains we have available these days can travel on average just 50 to 100 miles per hour. But to everyone's surprise, the company closed down last year. Even though they made prototypes in the Nevada desert, the project had many problems. They needed to build huge tubes that would have been scattered around, even through cities. And the trains couldn't handle turns very well, so the tubes had to be straight. In 2020, the company did a test run with 2 people, going at 107 miles per hour. It was the first successful ride using this technology. Despite this initial success, the company soon announced they'd focus on moving objects instead of people. Does this mean we'll never be able to use this type of transportation for people? Let's look at it historically. Pneumatic tube transport relies on air pressure to push things through pipes. Back in the day, it was used for sending messages and moving small objects in big buildings. Even today, places like hospitals, banks, and stores still use it to quickly send things like medicine and money. Here's how it works. Say you run a store with cash registers. Instead of risking theft by walking cash to a safe, you can send it through tubes. Each register connects to a tube that leads to a safe or cashier's office. All objects would be transported through canisters. They'd snugly fit in the mechanism, then get sucked by a vacuum created by a compressor. Canisters are often sturdy cylindrical boxes made of tough plastic, carrying items weighing up to about 5 pounds and traveling at speeds up to 22 miles per hour. There are limitations to consider. Installing pneumatic tube systems in existing buildings can be challenging, as they require careful planning during the initial design phase. There's also the risk of valuable items becoming stuck or damaged during transport. You can't move around objects that are larger than 5 pounds or so it doesn't eliminate the need for manual labor. For more than half a century, until 1953, the New York City Post Office used a similar system to transport its mail. It was based on pipes that ran underground, up to 6 feet below the city streets. Because it had revolutionary speeds at the time, the people who operated the system were nicknamed Rocketeers. At its busiest, this tube system handled almost 100,000 letters every day, which was a third of all the city mail. The first thing they sent through these tubes was a book wrapped in a flag, along with copies of important country documents. Other funnier objects are rumored to have been sent through this system, including a fake peach meant as a joke or a sandwich. They even sent a cat through one of the tubes once. It's hard to imagine how the cat made it through the system at such a high speed, but it did. Local authorities soon had to let go of this project, though, because of the costs. The New York population also grew larger, and the number of letters became overwhelming for these small tubes. Hyperloop's idea was to transport people using the same principles. Cool as it sounds, it's not new. Images with similar concepts date back to the 19th century. Some say the idea hasn't been properly studied in the 20th century because large companies are more interested in selling cars. But even with modern technology, a pneumatic tube train is hard to build, mostly because it involves multiple engineering areas and it's expensive. Getting permits would also be difficult. Another issue is that compressed air that's being pushed through a small area translates to a lot of heat, so cooling systems need to be worked into these plans. One potential solution was to put a water tank in each train to catch the heat and turn it into steam at the next stop. Even if the science makes sense on paper, in reality, there's not a lot of space in the small train for a good heat exchange. This means more water, which means more weight, which in turn means less speed. One Asian company, however, claims to have created the fastest pneumatic train earlier this year. In theory, this device could transport someone from New York to Los Angeles in under an hour, or from London to Paris in just 15 minutes. To prove their efforts, they set up a mile-long testing track where the prototype train reached 387 miles per hour. The company considers this test a success, affirming that it proved the seamless interaction between the test tube, vehicle, and track. As they were developing the project, they uncovered troubles of their own. A power outage, leak, fire, or even a simple human error could lead to a disastrous accident. More so, the train's high speed and rapid acceleration could induce discomfort among passengers. Hyperloop trains aside, what might the future of getting around look like? Better ways of moving from one place to another could make our lives easier by reducing time, expenses, and accidents. One idea could be fast trains that float. These speedy vehicles might use strong magnets to hover above the tracks, letting them go fast while making less noise and shaking than regular trains. They're also less likely to get stuck because they don't rub against the tracks as much. These trains also don't need gas, so they're better in terms of resources as well. Instead of engines, they use magnetic fields made by special coils in the walls and tracks to push them forward. Right now, 6 of these lines are up and running in Asia, but soon they might appear in the US too. The first one is planned to connect Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and later it might stretch all the way to New York. About 20 companies are also exploring the idea of flying taxis. They could transport people in cities with the help of small planes. The idea is to offer safe rides at a fair price, like a $70 trip from Manhattan to Kennedy Airport, without bothering those on the ground below. Challenges here include reducing flight expenses, increased urban noise, and drafting rules about flying over busy cities. Even though some people are still nervous about the idea, it seems that driverless cars are on the way to becoming a reality. Many automobile companies are testing out their prototypes, even though there are still questions about how safe they can be. We don't know yet if the same rules should apply to them as the ones for human drivers. Lots of accidents happen because drivers aren't paying attention, but robots don't get distracted. Driverless cars are supposed to take fewer risks and go slower to keep everyone safe. On the downside, they're expensive, with prices expected to be over $100,000 apiece. Projects including delivery drones have already been implemented too. For instance, a UPS drone brought medicine to people's homes in the U.S. after getting approval from the Federal Aviation Administration. It was a big step forward for drones, even though there are still rules to sort out before they can be used on a larger scale. Drones have to prove they're safe before they can fly freely over people's heads. So, for now, UPS is only using them in rural areas and around hospitals. To solve traffic jams, we might turn to building roads underground and driving our cars through tunnels. This could work better than flying cars because the process is not affected by the weather. One plan is to lower cars down with a big elevator and allow them to circulate on a fast metal platform. The advantages may include faster speeds, since there are fewer risks of accidents from things like wild animals crossing the road. It also might be less expensive, since people are less likely to be stuck in traffic. Not to mention our cities might end up looking a little prettier and less noisy.
These weird-looking blobs are not just some random jelly balls in the ocean. Those are some of the biggest organisms with just one cell you'll find on Earth. And they pop if you squeeze them. We're looking at a specific type of algae that can be as small as a pinhead and as big as an eyeball. Or better yet, sailor's eyeball, as they're usually called. How large it's going to be depends on what's in its vacuole, which is the space inside of its cell wall. This organism is made of just one cell, but it can have more than one nucleus. It's like it has many control centers in just one cell. This happens because these organisms are so enocytic, which means they're made up of a bunch of nuclei that don't have walls that would separate them. These are not some mythical creatures hidden at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Divers around the world who like to explore coral reefs can stumble upon them. These algae come in different colors, such as black, bright green, or silvery. Their color depends on how their cell walls are set. In some cases, researchers stumbled upon a shiny orb on the seafloor that looked like a golden egg. The interesting thing is that the egg had a hole in it. So the question was if something had tried to get out or into this orb. Hopefully, it was just a jelly blob minding its own business. Normally, cells don't grow this big. It would mess up their balance. If something's too big, the ratio of surface area to volume won't be optimal anymore. But sailors' eyeballs have their own trick to end up this large. There are different parts inside them, and each has its own chloroplasts and nucleus. If you were to pop one of these jelly blobs, it wouldn't just burst like a balloon. Instead, it would probably pop up because they only need one nucleus for a whole new eyeball to grow. All this means is it would be hard to have them in aquariums, but they can at least live peacefully in the ocean, hoping no one will pop them. Now the question is, if a one-cell thing can grow to be this big, how large can real living beings get? The biggest animal that has ever walked on our planet was probably a dinosaur called Argentinosaurus, a giant that lived around 90 million years ago. We can compare it to the heaviest land creature we have today, the African elephant. It weighs less than 7 tons. Gigantic for us, it would look like a bug next to the Argentinosaurus, which weighed around 77 tons. They both look small next to the blue whale though, with a weight of 165 tons. That's probably the heaviest animal that has ever lived on Earth. In theory, and according to the laws of physics, creatures that live on land can gain up to 120 tons. There's a mathematical principle that explains why animals can't grow indefinitely. It says the ratio of two volumes is greater than the ratio of their surfaces. It means that as some creature gets bigger, not all of its parts get bigger at the same rate. If the elephant gets 3 times as wide, tall, and long, its overall size will also increase. But its mass will increase way more than that. It means the volume will grow faster than the surface of the animal's body. That's why bigger animals need much larger limbs to support their weight. The problem is that limbs probably won't be strong enough to carry such an enormous weight. The only way our imaginary giant elephant could move such a heavy body is by having extremely big and thick legs, just to walk, let alone do other things. Physics is not the only element that sets size limits. Otherwise, we'd have to be very careful not to end up under giant, wide feet of 100-ton animals wandering around. Another important thing is whether there's enough food for them, because these giants certainly need a lot of it. It's not just quantity, of course. Creatures can only grow bigger when they live in productive environments with high-quality foods rich in nutrients. That probably explains why certain reptiles, such as titanosaurs, grew way bigger than, for example, the biggest mammals that roamed terrestrial areas. Warm-blooded mammals have faster metabolisms. That means they need around 10 times more food to support their body sizes than reptiles do. Reptiles not only have slower metabolisms, but they also have lower body temperatures, so they can eat less and still feel satisfied. And they'll grow big anyway, since they don't burn their calories that quickly. No wonder that the biggest dinosaurs that walked on land were 10 times larger than the biggest mammals. Now, blue whales are kinda exceptions to all these rules. They're warm-blooded mammals, but when you live in the ocean, being a giant is not a big problem. It's easier to be very large in the water because it takes away lots of stress and pressure from your bones and muscles. And that's something land animals can't avoid. That way, blue whales can swim around and look for food the whole day. They can just casually open their mouth and let zooplankton come in. So yeah, our planet has proven it can handle mega creatures because, for hundreds of millions of years, some of them walked on land, not just swam in the ocean. But in the last 20,000 years, most of them have vanished. Big land mammals such as rhinos and elephants exist only in some parts of the world, and their numbers are getting lower. There are fewer whales than before, and for these, or some other giant animals to evolve that big again, humans would have to step back. We may not have gigantic dinosaurs, but some of the creatures living in today's world are still surprisingly and dangerously big, like the saltwater crocodile, the biggest reptile in the world. A male can grow up to 23 feet and weigh about 2,200 pounds. That's not the only scary thing about them. They have the second most powerful bite on the planet, right behind that of the Nile crocodile. The title of the largest bird on Earth belongs to the ostrich. It has wings, but they're too short for flying. The animal holds them outstretched when it runs, and this way it stays balanced more easily. Plus, their body is too big for flying anyway. That's why evolution had to give them some other advantage, like being able to run very fast. Don't make an ostrich upset unless you can run faster than 40 miles per hour in short sprints or at least 30 miles per hour over longer distances. In just one stride, this bird can cover up to 16 feet, which is how long a mid-sized family car is. Don't underestimate these fellas just because they're birds. They have very strong legs they use for self-defense. They can kick with a force that would take down even a lion. You wouldn't expect turtles to grow this big and to look so mean, but somehow, alligator snapping turtles still manage to surprise us. With jaws that look like beaks, spiked shells, and thick, scaled tails, they really look like the dinosaur of the turtle world, or the main enemy from Super Mario games. They love to spend their time in lakes, rivers, and canals of the southeastern United States and live for up to 100 years. They have chemosensory organs in their necks, which means they can smell using their throats. That helps a lot because their eyes aren't much of use in the murky waters where they live. Instead, they just draw water into their throat in a specific method we call gular pumping, to get samples of the water around them they want to smell.
Hey, it's possible that Jurassic World is not just a fantasy. Dinosaurs could really be walking, swimming, or flying around somewhere out there, but not on Earth. Some scientists think there may be planets far, far away from our solar system where slightly different versions of T-Rex and other dinosaurs live. They got the idea based on the fact that our planet used to have about 30% higher oxygen levels than today. That's why complex and intelligent life forms like dinosaurs could develop in the first place. They also want to explore basic building blocks that are the reason why we have life on Earth. These building blocks are something we know as amino acids. They make proteins, sugars, and genetic material, RNA and DNA. They're consistent and mainly exist in one shape or orientation. There are two ways they can be oriented, right and left. That means they mirror each other, just like our hands. It's something we call chirality. For life to exist, proteins must have one form, which means they can be oriented right or left. On our home planet, almost all living things, from the smallest bugs to whales and elephants, have amino acids with a left-handed orientation. We're not exactly sure why things are set that way, but there's a theory that's because of meteorites that crash-landed on Earth 4 billion years ago. They brought specific kinds of amino acids and some other organic materials to our planet, and somehow set the pattern we have today. Maybe we could use special telescopes we created to search planets, especially those where conditions are similar to how they used to be on Earth back in time when dinosaurs existed. In that case, it would be better to watch them from a safe distance, because, considering what they might look like, researchers say it might be a safer choice. That's a cool idea, but it's still very tricky. The history of life on our planet, especially that of dinosaurs, involved many catastrophic events and mass extinctions. There's always more room for new theories about dinosaurs. One of them says oil comes from dinosaurs. Interesting, but not true. Oil formed from the remains of sea animals and plants from millions of years ago. This was way before dinosaurs appeared. Tiny organisms ended up at the bottom of the sea. As bacteria decomposed animals and plants, they removed most of the oxygen and some other elements from them. It left behind only a sludge, which was mostly made of hydrogen and carbon. As time passed, those remains became covered with many layers of silt and sand. When the depth of the sediment increased to 10,000 feet or even more, heat and pressure turned the remains into natural gas and crude oil. It's possible that dinosaurs lived or fell in the sea and later became petroleum in the same manner. But no one has ever found crude oil containing their skeletons. So this is just an unproven theory. Then there's the feathered dinosaur theory, which, unlike the previous one, seems to have more foothold in reality. Back in 2010, researchers found evidence that 100 million years ago, there had been a dino species with ginger feathers. Another group of scientists claimed there had been a different species from 150 million years ago. Those dinos had freckles and reddish-brown feathers on the tops of their heads. The color patterns probably had their purpose. Maybe it was a way to communicate with other representatives of their species or to attract mates. But years later, scientists studied the Microraptor, also called a feathered dinosaur. They realized it had probably been more like a bird than a dinosaur. The key point is how birds replace their feathers. Birds that fly have to replace their feathers in a specific order, otherwise they won't be able to fly very well. And the Microraptor's fossils showed that this creature had changed its feathers in a similar pattern. So they're not really sure which category this animal falls into. Dinosaurs that had feathers shed a lot of their skin piece by piece, like dandruff. Hey Bob, looking a little flaky there. Need a new shampoo? Yeah, they didn't shed their skins like lizards do, as if they take off an old suit. When we talk about dinosaurs, we usually don't picture them as social creatures, more like isolated ones similar to lizards. But some researchers discovered an 80-million-year-old collection of clutches in the Gobi Desert. It means there were colonies of dinosaurs that protected their nests and guarded their young, similar to birds. Crocodiles are known for doing that too. Pterosaurs were flying dinosaurs, and pelycosaurs were fin-backed ones. Some studies have shown that these two species used their exaggerated head crests and sails or fins to get to their potential partners. There are many theories about their crests and what they were needed for, though. Some experts believe that was how dinosaurs regulated their temperature. Others think they needed a crest to steer through the air. It's hard to say anything for sure since their fossils are rare and they don't have living descendants. But the most likely option is that the crest had the same purpose as a peacock's tail and was used for selecting mates. The bigger the crest, the more chances a pterosaur had to get a partner. You know theropods, those scary meat-eating predators that are shown in most dinosaur movies? Well, they might have enjoyed eating plants way more than tearing flesh. Not all of them, but it's possible that many of them weren't as fierce as we might think. Those big scary ones, like T-Rex, could be exceptions rather than the rule. The thing is, Movies show these creatures to be way faster than they probably were in reality. They could probably run just a little bit more quickly than the average human runner. Scientists study the diet of coelurosaurs. Those seem to be the closest relative to birds. It was hard to figure it out because some of the dinos from this group had peg-like teeth, or in some cases, no teeth at all. To understand what they ate, researchers had to look for direct evidence and check if there was anything in their stomachs. And after they discovered certain things, including a beak with no teeth, they realized these fellas had followed a vegetarian diet most of the time. Even some famous ones, such as velociraptors, could be just innocent plant eaters and not terrifying beasts from Jurassic Park and our childhood nightmares. Over 10 years ago, scientists found fossils of a small dinosaur. It was a creature as big as a parrot with long legs. It came from a family with some of the most famous predators we know about, such as T-Rex and Velociraptor. Most dinosaurs that lived on land had 5 fingers, but later some of them ended up with fewer fingers. This new one they discovered was special because instead of having 3 fingers, which was more common for its family, it had just 1 finger with a sharp curved nail at the end of each front limb. This creature probably used this 1 finger to dig into insects' nests to feast. Even though we know all about the asteroid that wiped out dinosaurs, some have other theories. One paleontologist even had an idea that dinosaurs had possibly reached their end because they had been eating one another. This especially worked for ancestors of fierce, scary predators such as the Tyrannosaurus rex. It's possible they ate so many eggs of other dinosaurs that many species just went extinct. Once they started eating the eggs of very big dinos that we know as sauropods, it's possible they started getting bigger too. And no dinosaur mother could stop them from eating her eggs because she couldn't be around all the time. There were other big predatory animals that ate eggs, even early mammals. But in any case, later research showed dinosaurs couldn't have eaten enough eggs to have caused mass extinction. And that's all I have to say about that.
It turns out, starfish don't have a head. They are the head. When you first look at a starfish, you think it's got 5 arms. Scientists have always been curious about why starfish look like this, and in particular, where their heads are. Most animals, including us, have bodies that are bilaterally symmetrical, meaning you can split them down the middle and get 2 matching sides. But starfish, along with sand dollars and sea anemones, are different. They're radially symmetrical, meaning their bodies have identical parts spread out from the center. Starfish, or sea stars, are special because they have this 5-way symmetry, and you can divide them into 5 equal parts. To make this discovery, scientists used a technique called RNA tomography, which helps study genes. They focused on the genes controlling the outer layer, including the nervous system. Surprisingly, the genes associated with the head were active in the starfish's head and its arms. Yet, genes linked to the body trunk were hardly active. This suggests that starfish have a unique separation between their head and body. The study sparked new questions about how these creatures evolved and what their ancestors with trunks might have been like based on their fossil records. It also showed that genes active in the head of an acorn worm were also active in a starfish's skin, covering its entire body. These genes are the most active at the center of each arm, changing towards the arm's end to resemble genes found in the rear of other animals. Starfish lack genes for a torso. All this challenges traditional views on starfish anatomy. There's a rumor about Paul McCartney recording an ultrasonic whistle for his Shetland sheepdog at the end of the Beatles song, A Day in the Life. Dogs can hear ultrasonic sounds since their hearing ability is incredible. To move just one of their ears, dogs need to involve 18 muscles. It allows them to swiftly locate the origin of sounds, and it's another skill where they outshine us. Their awesome ears sometimes shadow their noses. Dogs' sense of smell is up to 100,000 times more acute than that of humans. While humans have around 5 million scent receptors, a bloodhound boasts up to 300 million. Another study proves that dogs and bottlenose dolphins may share a fascinating similarity with humans. They call out the names of loved ones when they become separated. This makes them the first non-human animals to do so. The research has uncovered that dolphins copy one another's signature whistles when they're separated from close pals. In the Sarasota Dolphin Research Program recordings, pairs of dolphins were held in separate nets, but they could still communicate with each other. Turns out, some of their chit-chats were mimicking the unique whistles of their dolphin buddies. Next up, we have flamingos with their peculiar dining habits. You often see them feeding with their heads positioned upside down. This distinctive behavior is linked to the anatomy of their mouths and the mechanics of maneuvering their long, elegant necks into the water. These birds are skilled filter feeders, employing their tongues as effective sieves to capture food. When a flamingo lowers its neck beneath the water, it positions its mouth essentially upside down. Then the bird closes its mouth and skillfully propels water through comb-like extensions on its beak. It also utilizes its tongue to expel the water while retaining all the gathered food. If you've watched the movie My Octopus Teacher on Netflix, you might already know that octopuses can bond with humans. But this time, we'll only focus on the anatomy of this creature. Octopuses have 3 hearts. One heart pumps blood throughout the body, and the other 2 tag teams send that blood to the animal's gills. Octopuses also have 9 brains. Each of their 8 tentacles has its very own mini-brain. These mini-brains allow each tentacle to move independently at lightning speed. There's a 9th brain in the mix, and this one oversees the entire octo nervous system. Opossums are intelligent, in a way, too. They're known for pretending to pass away when their life is threatened. When they face predators, opossums attempt to intimidate their foes by showing their teeth, hissing, and growling. Yet, when these tactics fall short, opossums resort to shutting their eyes, collapsing onto their side, and pretending to have passed away. To look more convincing, an opossum might drool, let its tongue hang out, and even excrete waste to enhance the illusion of a sudden demise. Remarkably, opossums can uphold this state for several hours, waiting until they're confident that the threat is gone. Monkeys can be loud when calling one another, but a howler monkey's shout can travel approximately 3 miles in specific situations. Males are usually louder than females. The thing is, the sound is created by pulling air through a space in an enlarged bone in the animal's throat. This bone is larger in males compared to females, and that's why males sound louder. Polar bears have black skin beneath all that fur. Their fluffy white coat is actually translucent. It only seems white because it bounces back visible light. The skin itself is jet black. These creatures are also impressive when it comes to swimming. They can hit speeds of up to 6 miles per hour in the water, which is pretty fast for such big creatures. They can swim for miles and keep going for hours. Their big paws are designed for swimming. They use them to paddle through the water while their back legs stay straight and act like a rudder, helping them steer. Since we visited polar bears, we might as well add a romantic fact about penguins here. Male Gentoo and Adelie penguins put themselves out there with proposals. They offer their potential mates precious pebbles, essential for building nests in the harsh Antarctic landscape. If the lady penguin accepts the pebble, they're in it for life, bonded and ready to mate. Another study has found that our adorable house cats share more than 95% of their genetic makeup with tigers. These little furballs also mimic many behaviors of their wild relatives, like marking territory with scents and the classic, stalking and pouncing during playtime. Biologically though, a cat's brain is kind of similar to a human's. We share identical emotional regions in our brains. Cats can also make up to 100 different sounds. Owls have eye tubes or cylinders. Their rod-shaped eyes don't do the eyeball moving. Our eyes can move in almost all directions. Owls have to make a full body or full head turn to look around, all because of night vision. To master the art of seeing in the dark, they need large corneas that can scoop up every bit of light. Most nighttime critters, like slow lorises or tarsiers, have enormous eyes to get the job done. But owls have small skulls on their agenda, so those big eyes couldn't swell out. Cockroaches are notorious for their survival skills, and a key reason is their unique brain structure. They have two brains, one in their head and a more basic one near their abdomen. They're so hard to get because these critters are incredibly quick to react. They have tiny hairs on their rear end that can feel the slightest breeze. When these hairs twitch, the cockroach doesn't waste time. It instantly switches to escape mode. Research shows that a cockroach can react in just 1/20th of a second. So by the time we turn on the light or grab something to target it, the cockroach is already speeding off. Cats can have dreams. Sometimes you can see your cat's whiskers twitching or its legs kicking while it's sleeping. This doesn't necessarily mean your pet is having a nightmare. We can look at human sleep to get a clue about what's happening with our feline friends. During REM sleep, our brains get super active, almost like when we're awake. That's also the prime time for dreaming. REM sleep is named this way because of the quick movements the eyes make under the eyelids. But while our eyes might be moving, the rest of our body stays still. The focus is on what's going on in our minds. This is true for cats too. Besides an occasional twitch, cats usually don't move much when they're asleep.
You know what? Onions can help fight off the flu. And apparently they can do it in various ways. Like you can put them in your socks, which somehow transfer their disease-fighting abilities through your feet, or you can drink onion-infused water to treat or prevent illnesses like colds or the flu. Well, unfortunately, these are all false beliefs. When it comes to directly combating cold or flu viruses, onions are unlikely to have a super impact, but overall, they're good for you. At the same time, onions do have a high concentration of quercetin. It's a pigment known for its potential anti-inflammatory properties. The correct way to open a new deodorant is by manually prying the top off. Nope. Removing the cap from a new deodorant stick involves twisting it. This move triggers the mechanism to push the safety cap off. This method helps avoid the hassle of manually prying the lid off, leaving deodorant residue under your nails. Now, what about the ideal time for using deodorant? You might think it's in the morning before you leave the house, but the optimal time to use deodorant is in the evening. At this time, your body temperature is cooler and your underarms are less moist, providing a greater opportunity for the deodorant to work effectively on your skin. Applying deodorant in the morning is still okay for those people who don't suffer from excessive sweating. So, if you sweat a moderate amount, there's no reason to change your daily routine. Now, keeping your shower curtain inside or outside the tub is a choice. But apparently, putting the shower curtain inside the tub reduces splashing and prevents water from escaping. The decorative cloth curtain belongs on the outside, whereas the plastic one should be on the inside. I mean, the whole idea is to prevent splashing water. Now, watering your plants on scorching hot days harms them. Rain showers occur during the summer season all over the world, and plants easily survive in these conditions. At the same time, when you water your plants on hot days, a substantial amount of liquid might evaporate before it can effectively benefit the plants. It's worth noting that this might be different for some sensitive indoor plants, such as African violets. It can result in leaf damage if you pour very cold water directly onto their leaves. Now, let's continue with another garden-related thing. Tree roots only reach as far as the outer edge of tree branches. Myth or fact? Well, it's a misconception. The root systems of many trees can extend well beyond the diameter of their crowns. For instance, magnolia trees can have roots that reach nearly 4 times their crown diameter, while the roots of red maple trees can exceed their crowns by up to 3 times. It's easier to shuck corn before it's boiled. Well, in the past, before the invention of modern cooking methods, many recipes involved pre-shucked corn. However, you can still grill it with or without the husk when it comes to recipes like grilled corn. A recommended technique is to partially shuck the corn, leaving only a few layers closest to the cob still attached. This method retains moisture while also providing appealing char marks on certain kernels. Alternatively, you can cook whole, unshucked ears of corn in the microwave or by boiling it, if you prefer. Moving on with everyday items you've been storing wrong. Take eggs, for example. Leaving them in the fridge door is good for them, right? No, this can lead to a roller coaster of temperatures every time you grab a snack. As for nuts, they're happier in the fridge. Heat can make them go all wonky, especially if they're the kind with lots of good fats. So, keeping them chilled helps them stay fresher and tastier. There's another common myth about nuts. It's said that roasting them decreases calories, proteins, carbs, and fibers they contain. But no, both cooked and uncooked nuts have similar amounts of those. The main goal of roasting nuts is to enhance their flavor and crunchiness. Keep this in mind though. When nuts are roasted, the healthy fats they contain may get damaged, and in the end, this can result in a reduced nutrient content. Now let's talk about avocados. Don't toss them in the fridge if you want them to ripen on schedule. They like hanging out at room temperature. We can also put an end to another avocado-related myth. Avocados are fattening. Yeah, they do have a high fat content compared with most other fruits. But this doesn't necessarily make them bad for your health. In fact, avocados contain what's often called healthy fats, which can help reduce harmful cholesterol levels in your body. Now let's carry on with diet and food. Swapping white table sugar for unrefined options like honey, maple syrup, and coconut sugar is supposed to make your diet healthier. Well, don't fall for this myth. Sugar is sugar, no matter whether it's refined or unrefined. While unrefined sugars may contain a few extra vitamins and minerals, the advantage is minimal because they're still considered added sugars. These added sugars can add up and contribute to your diet's recommended limit on daily sugar intake. Full-fat products aren't a one-way ticket to weight gain. That's a myth from the 80s and 90s. Some people are still scared of fat, but it shouldn't be the case. Fat plays a few essential roles, such as protecting our organs, maintaining cell membranes, supporting health and development, and helping absorb vital vitamins. The key is to choose heart-healthy unsaturated fats like olive oil, canola oil, nuts, nut butter, and avocados over saturated and trans fats found in fatty meats and high-fat dairy products. There's a common belief that avoiding carbs entirely will make you lose weight. Well, that's a myth too. Low-carb diets have made their rounds, vilifying carbs, including fruits and whole grains. While some people have had success with these diets, it's usually because they've cut out highly processed carb-laden foods like chips, cookies, and white bread. You know, all the stuff we like. Eliminating an entire food group isn't the best approach, as you might miss out on essential nutrients. Another belief is that you can get rid of body toxins with a detox diet. Well, sorry, most detox diets don't live up to their promises. Your body is already good at detoxing itself with the help of your liver, kidneys, and gastrointestinal tract. You don't need to buy any special products. If you want to rejuvenate your body, focus on eating more whole foods, staying hydrated, and cutting out highly processed junk food. Okay, I have 3 life hacks for you. These aren't myths. Firstly, you can stop a pot from boiling over by putting a wooden spoon over its top. Secondly, if you position a cheese grater vertically, there's a better way to use it. Lay it down horizontally. This way the process will be less taxing for your arms. My next tip is about your yoga mat. Leaving it in a hot, humid spot like your car can ruin it. Keep it cool and dry for maximum yoga zen. Now, many people know they should keep their fancy fragrance bottles away from direct sunlight. So, some people store them in the refrigerator. This isn't the right move, unless you want your perfume to lose its overall depth. I mean, yes, fragrances don't like heat or humidity, but the interior of a refrigerator is too dry and cold for them. So it has the opposite effect and breaks down the scent molecules. And please, resist the urge to rub a bit of perfume on your wrist. It may be tempting, but rubbing your fragrances is a big no-no. This practice not only muddles and weakens the scent, it also causes the top notes to evaporate quickly. They say that if you have old photos in your house, the right way to stash them is by putting them in cardboard boxes. Well, this is a misconception. These types of boxes can damage your memories. Go for acid-free archival boxes if you want your pictures to look as good as new. The next one is more of a hack than a myth. It turns out dishwashers are more user-friendly than we give them credit for. When you're loading or unloading the dishwasher, you can save your poor back from unnecessary strain by pulling out the basket. You might think that foundations are safe at room temperature, but if you store your foundation in a makeup bag, heat can mess with the oils in your makeup. So pop this product in a cool drawer. Eye creams and serums can benefit from the chill too. Organic or homemade cosmetics without preservatives should also be refrigerated, but always check expiration dates. I know I do.
In 1975, in Puerto Rico, a farmer saw most of his goats lying lifeless on the ground. He got closer and saw that the animals were stiff and had 2 puncture marks on their necks. Goats were not the only animals that were hurt. Many pigs, cows, and geese lost their lives too. They all had the same distinctive bite marks on their necks, and all had been drained of their vital fluids. The locals immediately jumped to conclusions and blamed dogs, and the authorities didn't bother to do a better investigation and just said dogs had done it without looking for any proof. A couple of days later, though, many more animals were found deceased. Among them was a cow that had literally been opened, and it had a lot of scratches on its head. The farmer next door reported that his chickens had been destroyed by something. In just a few weeks, the creature took the lives of 90 farm animals. After some time, another farmer said that 10 of his goats had been drained, 7 had been hurt, and 11 were missing. This time, the authorities didn't waste any time and started the monster hunt, but they had no luck finding the culprit. The incident was all over the local newspaper, and the beast was named the Vampire of Mocha. The incident caught the attention of the Agricultural Commission, and scientist Juan Rivera was tasked to solve this otherworldly mystery. His first suspect was a Puerto Rican boa. This non-venomous snake can grow to be a little over 6 feet. Still, its diet consists of only small prey. It's also very shy of humans and other animals. It avoids bigger creatures at all costs. You're more likely to see fish climbing trees than this boa taking down a whole cow. Near the crime scene, a large cave was discovered, and we all know that weird creatures like living in dark, cold caves. In the cave, they found some crazy-looking bats. As we've seen in movies, bats can turn into vampires, so they must be the culprit. But no, bats were as innocent as they could be. Their favorite food wasn't cows or goats, it was figs. They were peaceful fruit-eating bats that didn't care about animals. Again, the researcher hit a wall. Suddenly, all the terror stopped in July 1975. It seemed like the creature had vanished into thin air, but not for long. 2 decades later, 62 miles from the previous site, more animals were found. A local vet examined them. He was terrified to discover that every animal had 2 precisely cut holes like he had never seen before. The animals were anemic and looked like they'd passed away recently. By the looks of it, the creature's favorite food was goats, and that's how it got the infamous name we all heard of, Chupacabra, which means the goat sucker. Dogs, chickens, rabbits, and other animals were not off the menu. In short time, the Chupacabra took 1,000 farm animals. Now, this animal had a name, but people still had zero idea about what the Chupacabra looked like, which was terrifying. In Canovanas, Madeline and her mother reported seeing a weird creature that could have been the Chupacabra. They said it had been walking on 2 legs like a human and resembled a kangaroo. They mentioned that the monster also had spikes on the back, no ears, large dark eyes, and 2 holes for a nose. It had 2 arms with 3 fingers. The Chupacabra seemed to like Madeline's house because her husband and his coworker found it in the garage. They tried to capture it, but didn't succeed. Madeline later drew a detailed sketch of it. Many people saw the sketch and reported seeing a similar creature. They claimed it had strong legs and wings and smelled like sulfur. Take all these descriptions with a grain of salt. If they'd been true, they would have been all over the news. But still, keep in mind these descriptions. They will be important later in the story. In 1976, on some talk show, they talked about the Chupacabra. and the show quickly went viral. Soon, people started reporting having seen a similar creature in Florida and Mexico. Many said that the stories were like a unicorn rodeo. They were totally made up. In Mexico, two skeptical inquiries, Patricia and Mario, laid traps around those farms where the Chupacabra had allegedly been seen. They caught some animals in their traps, but no sign of the goat sucker. They only captured wild dogs. The police stated that the Chupacabra was just a wild dog, not a mythical creature. And still, in the next 5 years, there were numerous sightings of the Chupacabra worldwide. On the 13th of August of the year 2000, a farmer from Nicaragua found 25 of his sheep and 35 of his neighbor's sheep hurt. So he decided to take the matter into his own hands. One night, he was patiently waiting in the pitch-black night for the creature to appear. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw something and managed to hit it. The creature passed away. Finally, they had proof that the Chupacabra was not just a fairy tale. It was a big thing. Later, the Chupacabra was examined by a vet. The vet was shocked because he had no idea what the creature was. Remember Madeleine's description? Well, the vet described the animal differently, but his story turned out to be more plausible. This Chupacabra had large teeth, giant claws, greenish eyes, bat-like skin, and a crest sticking out of its back. The vet concluded that the animal was some kind of hybrid. They thought it was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, but it sounds like an exaggeration and is hard to believe. We all know that such a mix is impossible. They did some tests on the body at the university in Nicaragua, and the results didn't quite deliver what they had expected. The animal was a wild dog with mange. Mange is an itchy skin disease that causes dogs to lose their hair. It's also highly contagious. When a dog has mange, their skin becomes scaly and wrinkled. When they returned the body, the farmer noticed it wasn't his Chupacabra. 7 years later, another body was found in Texas. Phyllis Cannon returned to her farm and noticed that some of her chickens had passed away. All seemed to be anemic. Later, she saw coyote-looking creatures that didn't have any hair. More of her animals were harmed, so she had to set up cameras on her farm. But unfortunately, like always, she didn't manage to record anything. Surprisingly, she got a call from a local farmer who had found the Chupacabra hit by a car. Later, another body was found much closer to her farm. She took some pictures of the animal, and soon, those images were all over the internet. Phyllis was curious and sent 5 DNA samples to 5 different universities. The results didn't match any animal in the archives. Researchers had no idea what it was, but it wasn't a dog. Phyllis still has one animal in her freezer and a taxidermied specimen in her house. There are many theories about the Chupacabra. Some claim that the animal is a genetically modified monkey that escaped the lab. Others state that it's some mysterious, otherworldly creature. The most consistent hypothesis is that the Chupacabra is a mix between a Mexican wolf and a coyote with mange. Now, do you remember that Phyllis said that she had sent samples to 5 universities and no match had been found? Well, it turned out she hadn't been telling the truth. At one university, they found that the animal was a mix between a coyote and a Mexican wolf and that it had mange. Animals with mange are weak and will likely try to hunt farm animals to survive. People, when they see something they don't know, tend to exaggerate, which is why all witnesses describe the animal differently.
A word of warning, when you're in Australia, never stick your finger into these holes. They might be home to burrowing spiders. Some species have a bite powerful enough to pierce nails. It feels similar to a hammer on your finger because of the venom. So always give your boots and outdoor clothes a quick check to be safe. Animals sometimes make homes or look for food in them, especially bandicoots. Silk-lined burrows in shady spots might belong to funnel web spiders. The silk works as a tripline to alert the spider inside about what's happening outside. Look for shiny dark brown to black spiders with finger-like spinnerets at the end of their abdomen. Then you'll find them. Males have a hefty mating spur sticking out of the middle of their second pair of legs. When these spiders feel threatened, they make aggressive moves, rearing up and showing off their startling fangs. These spiders, which belong to the Aranida order, are known for their funnel-shaped webs that widen at the entrance. They patiently wait in the narrow funnel for prey to touch the web, then swiftly capture it. In Australia, large brown spiders frighten people due to their venomous bites. They are infamous for causing people to lose their lives in southern and eastern Australia, particularly in the Sydney area since the 1920s. Quick access to the antidote after a bite is crucial in preventing severe consequences. The next spider is one of the world's most dangerous venomous spiders. Phonutria nigrivator is a spider living in South America. People often call it the Brazilian wandering spider. You see, in Brazil, 4,000 people get bitten by this critter each year. The bites can cause serious issues, such as hypertension, blurred vision, sweating, and vomiting. You wouldn't want to mate with this creature, as you can also face way more severe consequences than blurred vision. In some situations, its kiss can take a life. Apart from messing with humans, this spider has a diverse menu, including crickets, katydids, and even larger options like tree frogs, lizards, and bats. Operating under the cover of darkness, these creatures are the most active during the night. They ambush their prey instead of relying on webs. In the daytime, they seek refuge beneath logs or in narrow crevices. They love to be around banana trees, but can be found in urban areas and inside homes too. If you spot them one day, be prepared. This creature's body is covered with thick brown hair and is not that small. In 2013, a London family had to leave their home due to an infestation of Brazilian wandering spiders. The trouble began when an egg sac, hidden in a bunch of bananas, made its way to their local grocery store. No one noticed. When the family bought the bananas, the egg sac broke open. Potentially lethal spiders spread around the house. Over 2,500 people visit poison control centers annually in the U.S. Black widows are spiders with the signature hourglass mark on their bellies. Well, let's talk about their bite. These creatures have a bad reputation because their venom is supposedly 15 times stronger than what rattlesnakes pack. When they bite humans, the bite causes muscle aches and nausea. The venom can even mess with breathing by paralyzing the diaphragm. Despite these cases, most people who get bitten don't end up with serious issues unless they're elderly or very young. These sneaky creatures don't pick just one spot to hang out. You can find them in wood piles, burrows, or among plants that act as scaffolding for their webs. Black widows are especially dangerous for other insects and their mates. After a not-so-romantic mating dance, ladies sometimes go all Hannibal Lecter on their mates. These spiders are architects too, spinning massive webs where females stash a cocoon loaded with hundreds of eggs. Baby spiders move out once they hatch, but the web stays put. Those webs are also traps. Different kinds of prey later join the black widow's spooky snack collection. Yellow sac spiders range in size from approximately 0.12 to 0.6 inches and construct silken tubes under stones, in leaves, or in grass. They're found across the United States and southward toward Mexico and South America. They are venomous to humans and, unfortunately, are commonly spotted indoors. The venom of the yellow sac spider contains cytotoxin. This is a substance that can damage or impair cell function. Reactions like redness and swelling at the bite site are common. Yellow sac spiders are not known for their calm nature either. For instance, a female yellow sac spider may bite when protecting her eggs. These spiders usually come in different light colors. They can be a hassle for people in more than one way. Your car can be in danger too. On rare occasions, they may even set up nests in car engines. Moving on to wolf spiders. They're part of a large and widespread group found worldwide. They're named this way for their wolf-like hunting behavior of chasing and pouncing on prey. Around 125 species exist in North America, and approximately 50 live in Europe. These spiders are typically dark brown, with long, broad, hairy bodies and sturdy elongated legs. Like me. Just kidding. They're super speedy. While they usually create silk-lined tubular nests in the ground, some may conceal the entrance with debris. Others build turret-like structures. A few species also spin webs. Wolf spiders may bite in self-defense. They are venomous, but their bites are not considered dangerous. Some people who are allergic to spider bites may experience nausea, dizziness, and an elevated heart rate. The bite of the spider's large fangs is similar to a bee sting, so it can cause a physical wound at the bite site, and the venom may cause itchiness. The combination of their powerful bite, rapid movements, and startling appearance can be quite unsettling. Beware of the redback spider, a close relative of the notorious black widow. It used to live in Australia, yet it has managed to spread its web across New Zealand, Belgium, and Japan through grape exports. The distinctive red stripes or hourglass marks on their black backs are more noticeable in females. Disturb a female, and you'll see how she can defend her eggs. You're likely to get bitten. These spiders can sneak into shoes or clothing, lurking against the victim's skin while they're dressing. Both male and female redbacks have a venomous bite. Their venom is a cocktail of neurotoxins. It can cause sweating, rapid heartbeat, and swollen lymph nodes. The redback has control over the venom dose, so symptoms vary based on how much is injected. Australia deals with over 250 redback bites annually, many requiring anti-venom treatment. The latest case, when a person lost their life after being bitten, dates back to 1956. Yet it can happen, so stay vigilant and cautious around these stealthy spiders. Let's talk about the heavyweight champion of the spider world, the Theraphosis blondie, casually known as the Goliath bird eater. This giant tarantula can stretch up to 11 inches and tip the scales at 6 ounces. To put it in perspective, this spider is big enough to cover your dinner plate and is certified by the Guinness World Records. The nickname might make you picture a tarantula feasting on a hummingbird, but that's more of an artistic exaggeration dating back to the 18th century. These spiders are more into munching on arthropods and rarely go for bird snacks. Goliath bird eaters don't bother with webs like their spider buddies. Instead, they're all about silk, using it to line their cozy burrows beneath the forest floor. The spider itself looks dangerous, but its bite almost never requires a doctor's visit. It feels more like a wasp sting. Goliath bird eaters are the biggest spidey on Earth. On the other side of the spectrum, we have this guy from Colombia. They are among the tiniest spider species. Grown-up males of this species are 0.015 inches long, tinier than your average pinhead. Females are usually a bit larger. Well, that was creepy, wasn't it?
What if 99% of humanity disappeared? First off, we're talking about a massive reduction in people, leaving only 80 million humans on the entire planet. But hey, don't panic just yet. Let's see how this wild ride would unfold. Imagine bustling cities turned into ghost towns, empty highways and quiet neighborhoods. It'd be like a never-ending vacation for those left behind. Of course, there'd be some challenges to tackle, like whoops, untended gas mains causing fires, and those abandoned chemical storage facilities and industrial plants might create some pollution. Oh, and let's not forget about abandoned nuclear power plants. Wild animals would be more free, and poor domestic cattle and sheep would struggle in cold northern climates. To make things worse, stored gasoline wouldn't last long because it's not so great at staying stable. Let's get to the silver lining. With only 80 million people, there would be plenty of resources. Organizing and salvaging whatever's left would be totally doable, especially in smaller countries like Belgium. They'd probably have a, "Hey, we got this" attitude. They'd have just around 120,000 folks left, all within a couple of hours' drive from each other. That is, of course, if this remaining 1% of the world's population is scattered around the planet equally based on countries' populations before this event happened. In this case, pretty much every nation would face a similar situation. Imagine South Korea with 500,000 people, mostly hanging out together. Brazil would have 2 million inhabitants chilling out along the Atlantic coast. Hopefully, unlike those movies where post-apocalyptic gangs go mad, the survivors would try to stick together in their old communities. These resourceful fellas would band together in new family and village communities, and they'd have the knowledge and skills to handle any troublemakers. Remember, we're social creatures. and we'd want to stick together to face the unknown. Well, at least we wouldn't have to start from scratch here. We'd have a major advantage. All the knowledge accumulated by humanity would still be with us. If we had electricity and internet available, we would be okay. So, would we re-industrialize? Yeah, we would. We'd have tools and machines still lying around, giving us a head start. Sure, renewable energy might be tricky at first, and we might have to rely on fossil fuels like coal, but we're resourceful, and we'd find a way to make it work. Plus, we'd have some brilliant minds with critical skills who'd step up to the challenge. This type of stuff kind of happened in real life. Think of the historical collapse events. They made an epic comeback that spanned centuries. Back in the 14th century, a plague struck and claimed the lives of up to half of all Europeans. The Middle East was also impacted, with around a tenth of the global population succumbing to the disease. Surprisingly, this devastating event had little negative impact on Europe's technological and economic progress. And 2 centuries later, the population eventually rebounded to how it was before. 2 other instances of collapse are that of Rome and the Bronze Age. Both brought down impressive civilizations that had enjoyed technological advancements and economic prosperity and engaged in international trade. The Bronze Age collapse occurred between 1200 and 1150 BCE, leading to the fall of Mycenaean, Mycenaean Greece and Hittite civilizations, and the weakening of Egyptian and Assyrian civilizations. To this day, historians remain uncertain about the exact reasons behind this collapse. Rome, once boasting over 1 million inhabitants and serving as the seat of the Western Roman Empire for centuries, faced a dramatic decline in the 5th century. Within a few decades, the entire empire collapsed. It took until the 1930s for Rome to surpass its previous peak population. Fortunately, there are no historical examples of collapse events that resulted in more than 20% of the global population's demise. Many aspects of our physical infrastructure, such as machines, tools, and buildings, would still be intact and usable, placing us in a far better position than in 2500 BCE. The remaining 80 million survivors would have access to the wealth of knowledge accumulated by humanity. Moreover, some individuals might hold critical professions like engineers or chemists. It's quite likely that some people would have agricultural knowledge, helping feed the population. Okay, but let's make this scenario more personal. If you woke up one day to find 99% of the population missing, it would undoubtedly be an overwhelming and surreal experience. Survival would become your immediate priority, and your actions would largely depend on the resources and skills available to you. Here's what you would probably do. You'd take a moment to comprehend what's happened. This sudden disappearance of people would be shocking and confusing. Your friends and family would most probably be gone too, like it happened in Avengers. Your primary focus would be securing essential survival items, such as food, water, shelter, and medical supplies. You'd need to visit nearby grocery stores, pharmacies, and warehouses to gather provisions that could last for an extended period. Then you'd need to find other survivors. I mean, many people now lack essential skills like growing food, purifying water, or self-defense. You'd need to start learning them if there was no internet and no YouTube tutorials to rely on. Well, libraries, museums, and educational institutions have tons of information about the world and its history. Once you formed a community, you and your fellas would have to protect it like there's no tomorrow. You might feel like there isn't one at that point anyway. While most technology might still work initially, you'd need to ensure the protection of power sources. To do that, you'd have to be very cautious. The world would be in turmoil, so you'd need to remain vigilant and cautious of potential dangers. Without proper law enforcement and governance, there could be risks from wild animals, natural disasters, or even other survivors who might be hostile. Now let's explore the best and worst case scenarios. The sudden disappearance of so many people would create widespread chaos, leading to mass accidents and damage. With the absence of healthcare professionals and medical supplies, diseases could spread, leading to health crises. Food production and distribution systems would collapse, and food shortages and famine could become a real possibility. Looting and violence could occur since desperate people would search for resources and try to survive. The best case scenario is that after all this chaos, survivors would eventually come together to support one another and form resilient communities. The world would have significantly fewer carbon emissions, leading to a positive impact on the environment. With a small population, resources like food and water might be more abundant and sustainable in the long run. Without the constraints of a highly populated world, people could focus on individual passions, arts, and creativity. With advanced technology still available, survivors might start working on preserving knowledge and advancing scientific research. But overall, the world would change drastically, and the future would be uncertain. Your actions and the actions of other survivors would play a crucial role in shaping the new world and determining its trajectory. Feeling like a fishing pro? Head to the nearest water body and try your luck at reeling in some aquatic treats. Now, here's an idea. Become a green thumb superstar. Plant those seeds, nurture your crops, and watch your mini farm flourish. Farm-to-table cuisine, anyone? And how about those furry friends? If you spot any wandering pets, befriend them, and you've got yourself some loyal companions. Now take a deep breath, chin up, and embrace your inner survival guru. Remember, this might be a wild ride, but you've got the spirit and the skills to thrive in this post-apocalyptic feast of life. So go out there. Listen to this. Neanderthal fiber technology. Nope, I'm not joking. The concept is real. In 2020, a team of scientists published a paper that redefined the way we saw our closest ancestors. A find in France changed archaeology forever, and it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. But let me start from the beginning. Neanderthals. For a long time, they fit the image of the typical cavemen. If you are now thinking of someone like Fred Flintstone, you wouldn't be much wrong. What was the reason behind this stereotype? When did we start believing that Neanderthals were not the brightest tools in the shed of evolution? In comes William King, a 19th century British geologist. He was the man who named the Neanderthals. Based on the bones King found, the scientist declared the species not intelligent, and this image stuck with the Neanderthals for centuries to come. But a piece of string, just 1/4 of an inch long, changed everything. A small, dry river valley, Abri du Maras, was the place of the great find. Archaeologists unearthed a cord fragment next to a stone tool. Such twisted fibers could have been used for everything from making clothes to fishing nets. In prehistory, this was some advanced tech, and the Neanderthals seemed to have mastered it. Scientists already knew that these early humans made tar from birch bark, and that they produced shell beads. There's even evidence of Neanderthal art. They were definitely not primitive. The string section and similar finds are changing the way we perceive our ancestors. The world of archaeology is constantly changing. Take the pyramids in Egypt, for example. Turns out, they weren't really built by an army of people who the pharaoh made work until they passed out. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, was the man who started the confusion. He claimed, in 500 BCE, that 100,000 men took part in the construction of the Great Pyramid in Giza. He made no mention of who they were and why they were building the pyramids. That's how the myth started. Huge stone slabs pulled by humans, driven by a foreman with a whip. But Egyptologists would beg to differ. Those are the scientists who study ancient Egypt's culture. Fairly recently, they uncovered a workers' village that told a different tale. Yes, there was evidence of hard work on the workers' bones, but the construction industry is demanding even today. It took almost 6 years for 12,000 workers to complete the world's tallest building, Burj Khalifa. Back in Egypt, 3 times more workers finished the Great Pyramid in around 2 decades. An impressive feat of ancient engineering, wouldn't you agree? Superiors looked well after the Egyptians who built the pyramids. Their diet was rich in protein. They had medical care and they got paid properly. In fact, they lived better than the non-working population. And they lived with their families near the construction site. Archaeologists know all this because they unearthed bakeries and dormitories with bread jars and other goodies. Looks like the pharaohs were okay employers after all, and the job market wasn't that terrible. They also kept detailed papyrus records of the build and hieroglyphs. You and I wouldn't stand a chance of reading these letters that resemble images. Egyptologists had the same problem. For over a millennium, no one had used this type of font. And it's not like there was an English ancient Egyptian dictionary you could open and find meanings of words. But all this changed in 1822. A couple of decades before, the French found a broken slab of black granite. The stone contained one text in 3 scripts: Ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Demotic. The last one was also the Egyptian language, but in a simplified script. Scientists dated it back to 196 BCE. The content is a religious proclamation. A French philologist and Orientalist, Jean-François Champollion, was the first one to crack the code. You see, people haven't forgotten ancient Greek letters. The Frenchman successfully matched the Greek letters with the ones in the Egyptian script. And voila, we were finally able to read hieroglyphs. The name of the piece of granite that made it all possible was the Rosetta Stone. The importance of its discovery went beyond archaeology. The word Rosetta Stone even entered the English dictionary. It represents a discovery that helps people understand an enigma that has been puzzling them for a long time. There are similar games. A symbol is attached to a particular message. Then you have to decode the message by replacing the symbol with a corresponding letter. In a nutshell, this is what scientists did with the Rosetta Stone more than 2 centuries ago. Do you know what is the oldest deciphered language in Europe? It has an unattractive name, Linear B. The script belongs to the Mycenaean Greek language. It predates the ancient Greek alphabet by several centuries. You can easily guess which script it is descended from. Linear A. The people from Crete used Linear B more than 1,000 years ago. During the Late Bronze Age, the Greek civilization that used the script vanished. There was no one who could read Linear B, and more importantly, no one knew it existed in the first place. This was about to change during the first years of the 20th century. A British archaeologist by the name of Sir Arthur Evans excavated a vast palace complex at Knossos, Crete, Greece. This was the center of the Minoan culture that created the enigmatic script. The palace boasted some 1,300 rooms. They had colorful paintings of dolphins, griffins, and bulls. All of these captivated the archaeologists' imagination. But their biggest find was at first overlooked: thousands of slabs of baked clay. The fire that brought down the palace helped preserve the tablets. It was impossible to read the slabs, though. They were written in an unknown language. The scientific community had to wait for another half a century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was an English architect and cryptographer. Ventris studied Greek and Latin. While attending the famous archaeologist lecture, the young man decided to solve the puzzle of Linear B once and for all. He managed to do so in 1952. One of Ventris's most amazing discoveries was that the script was an archaic form of Greek. But cryptology still hasn't solved the code of Linear A. This writing system will remain a mystery until a motivated young person like Michael Ventris comes along. They wouldn't have to be a professional archaeologist. Basil Brown certainly wasn't. Yet in 1939 he discovered the richest early medieval tomb in Europe. This happened in Sutton Hoo in the southeast of England. This wasn't an ordinary tomb made out of stone. It was a full-size ship, 3 times as long as a London double-decker bus. And that's not all. Apart from its main purpose, the ship was full of riches. Deluxe hanging bowls, feasting vessels, gold and dress accessories, and luxurious textiles were just some of the treasures found. Archaeologists were also amazed by the silverware from distant Byzantium. You probably know this city as Istanbul, Turkey. Even in our age, it's several days' drive from Sutton Hoo. Just imagine how much time and money it cost to import a silver plate in the 7th century. That's when the ship went down, according to archaeologists. The English couldn't have done it. At that time, there was no England. The people living in the British Isles at the time were the Anglo-Saxons. Perhaps the ship from the grassy mounds in Suffolk belonged to one of their kings? We will never know. The The local acidic soil did away with any possible evidence, or no one laid there in the first place. It could have been a cenotaph, which is a monument constructed to honor an important person. The archaeologists still don't have a definite answer. But what they have found at Sutton Hoo shed light on the Dark Ages. Before the discovery of the ship, they knew little about what had been going on in Britain after the Romans left. Now, the image of the early Anglo-Saxon society was much clearer. Perhaps the English soil will be the site of the next great breakthrough in archaeology.
So, imagine that ChatGPT will start perceiving itself as a person and will feel emotions in a few years. Many people are afraid that it will want to take over the planet. However, this fact won't be as important as the question people will start asking themselves at that moment. If humanity has created a machine with self-awareness, then could it be that humanity was also created artificially? Now, artificial intelligence lives on the internet, computers, and in digital reality. But what if we also live inside a huge, powerful computer? What if our universe is just a simulation? The most extraordinary thing is that some facts seem to point to this. There's a whole science in the world that studies this theory. It's called information physics, and it assumes that time, space, and matter are not fundamental natural phenomena, but bits of information. This information forms a picture that creates the laws of physics for us. For example, we feel cold and warm not because atoms get cold or warm, but because their movement accelerates or slows down. The speed of particles can be like bits of information. Billions of them could form the picture of reality. Once, philosopher Nick Bostrom said that an advanced civilization could create such complex technologies that simulations of these technologies would be indistinguishable from our reality. And Elon Musk said in 2016 that we were most likely in a simulation. Wow. The laws of physics resemble a giant code that programmers write when creating apps or games. For many of us, all these complex trigonometric equations and formulas of the laws of physics are too complicated. Tell me about it. But scientists who understand this issue see that the principal workings of these laws are beautiful, and this may suggest that someone deliberately created this beauty. Virtual worlds, apps, or games are based on information processing. If you delve into this information, you'll see that it consists of bits and pixels. Any picture on your phone screen is pixels, and any file transfer process is based on bits. They add up to bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, and so on until a bigger picture is formed. And if our life is a simulation, it must also consist of bits. In our case, pixels and bits are atoms and other particles that make up our universe. There are processes inside your computer and phone with maximum speed limits and computing power. If you start exceeding it, then your device will start working more slowly. So, in our reality, there is also a maximum speed limit. This is the speed of light. When an object starts moving almost as fast as the speed of light, time slows down for that object too. Also, time flows more slowly near a black hole. This object, with an unimaginable gravitational mass, can be something heavy that overloads the processor's computing power. There's also such a thing as quantum entanglement, in which two particles can be connected even though they're far away from each other. Electrons travel around an atom. They are connected, and if the property of one changes, the second one will react. And even if you place these electrons on different sides of a galaxy, they will retain this connection. How is this possible? Scientists don't know. A double-slit experiment is one of the most famous experiments that hint that our world is a simulation. The existence of this experiment can be reduced to a simple thesis that the world exists only when we look at it or interact with it through touch, hearing, and other senses. So imagine that you've launched a new game on an old computer. Sometimes the game map freezes. In the game, you turn to the left and see how the mountains and the roads are getting loaded. Then you turn to the other side and the same thing is happening there. In other words, the world in the game only loads when you look at it through the eyes of your character. This is necessary to facilitate the work of the processor. It's much more efficient to get a piece of information about the world when you look at it than to keep the whole world running simultaneously. Remember this. And now let's move on to the experiment. So, you have a device that fires small balls of light, photons. You release photons from the device and they crash into a blackboard, leaving white traces on the black surface. Now, put a wide plate with a little vertical slit on it between the device and the blackboard and fire photons again. The balls start crashing into the plate, but some of them fly through the thin gap. They smash into the blackboard and leave a vertical white mark on it. Everything looks quite logical, but now cut another slit with the same length and thickness in the plate. You release photons toward the plate. Some of them fly through the two slits. What do you think the trace on the board should look like? Two white vertical stripes, right? Well, take a look at the board. It's covered with many vertical lines. When photons pass through the plate, they acquire the properties of a wave and crash into the board, leaving a strange trail as if they've passed not through 2, but through 10 slits. So, at what point do they change their trajectory? Let's take a look. So, you stand between the board and the plate to see how particles turn into a wave. The device releases photons. They are passing through the two slits. Nothing unusual. There are 2 vertical traces on the board and no waves. You close your eyes and release photons again. This time they behave chaotically and leave many lines on the board. That is, their behavior changes depending on the observer. When you look at them, they behave logically. But when you don't look, the laws of physics seem to stop working. Does it remind you of anything? It's like you're playing a game and looking at the world around you, which is loading. But if you don't look, the world stops working. Scientists still don't have a clear explanation of why particles behave differently when there's no observer. Hey, maybe they're shy. And this is not the only mystery. In the world of quantum physics, many laws of nature don't work. This is a science that gets more questions than answers every year. If we imagine our universe as a large hologram, then quantum physics would be its program code. What if people someday understand this code and learn to change it? This would allow us to transform space, time, and matter. The whole reality could be rewritten. Does the code say that material objects can't exceed the speed of light? We would rewrite it and make the speed limit 100 times higher. Does 1 hour last 60 minutes? What if you change one line of code and make 1 second as long as 1 year? A few software changes in the laws of physics would make it possible to turn snow into gold and the ocean into powdered sugar. The whole universe would turn into a vast playground. It seems cool at first glance, but people would probably lose control soon. The universe would be in chaos, and the beauty of our world is in the order that exists here. Now let's go back to artificial intelligence. Suppose its power reaches the level of the human brain, and it will become aware of itself. In that case, it won't come as a shock to it because it will most likely know the history of its appearance and stages. But how will we react if people discover they are a computer program? A computer program is too simple a word. A human is a complex, intelligent, multifunctional organism that experiences emotions, contemplates beauty, has abstract thinking, and much more. The term creation is more appropriate here. It won't matter if we were created artificially because our creation will still be beautiful and complex. Besides, remember that good video games or apps can be made only if developers love their creations.
Remember when you were little and you used to think fairy tales were real? I have some news that is about to make your inner child very happy. A little birdie told me that the couple that might have inspired the Beauty and the Beast was real. The only thing we need to find out is if the movie was really based on their story or not. How about you be our guest as we dive deeper into the origins of this beloved Disney movie? The year is 1537, and our story begins in the sunny center of Europe, the Canary Islands. The Canaries are home to outstanding natural attractions, and Canarios, the people who are born there, live their daily lives in the archipelago's pleasant climate. That year, a certain gentleman was born on the Canaries, and his destiny would be different from those of his fellow islanders. Meet Pedro Gonçalves. Pedro was born into a typical family, with a very rare congenital condition called hypertrichosis. If you've never heard of this before, hypertrichosis is a condition that can make someone look like a real-life werewolf, minus the howling part. It allows for hair to sprout excessively in places where hair wouldn't normally sprout. If in 2023 we still aren't sure of the causes of this disease, imagine people all the way back in the 1500s. Dermatologist Sarah Taylor says that throughout history, there have only been 50 documented cases of this condition. This is how rare Pedro's case was. The thing is, the excess facial hair made people look at Pedro differently. Records say he was called a wild man and was highly mistreated when he was a youngster. 10 years later, Pedro was put on a ship and sent to France as a gift to King Henry II. The king was about to be crowned, and it was normal for people to shower him with all kinds of presents. Little Pedro disembarked in the French city of Fontainebleau, where he moved into the king's castle. The entire court took interest in the boy as soon as he arrived. The castle's academics and doctors asked to study him closely, hoping to figure out if he was really a wild man. Soon enough, they understood that Pedro was just a 10-year-old boy. The boy even told them his name, which the French then changed to Petrus Gonçalves. The court communicated the news to King Henry II, and the king immediately ordered that the boy be given a proper education. As you're probably already thinking, Petrus's life changed completely at that moment. Just like Belle's life changed once she got trapped in the Beast's castle in the beloved Disney movie. But life in King Henry II's palace was very different for Petrus than it was for Belle. If the Disney princess got to befriend talking ceramics and wear beautiful silk dresses, Petrus needed to go to school on a daily basis. To the surprise of the court and his teachers, the boy excelled in Latin, which is no easy feat. During his life, he even became fluent in 3 languages. Now, Belle and Petrus did have one thing in common. They both had to learn etiquette. Remember how Lumiere did his best to teach Belle the ways of the palace? Perhaps we can say that it was similar for Petrus, except for the fact that it was probably a human that taught him what he needed to learn. The king became impressed, and soon Petrus was a frequent presence in the court. For the first time in his life, he would dress like a nobleman and take part in the court's social activities. But still, records show Petrus was never considered fully human due to his congenital disease. In 1559, King Henry II passed away, and Catherine de' Medici, his wife, took over the palace. If in the Disney version of the tale there is an infamous evil witch that curses the prince to become a beast, in this story, there is a not-so-kind queen. As far as records show, Queen Catherine de' Medici decided to arrange a marriage between Petrus and another gal also named Catherine. Let's call her Kathy, so we don't get too confused. The thing is, the queen didn't tell Kathy of Petrus's congenital condition, which doesn't sound too cool to me, huh? Kathy was the daughter of one of the court's royal servants, and as was the practice back then, when a queen told you to marry someone, you usually did. So Kathy didn't question the fact that she hadn't met Petrus, or knew nothing about him before the wedding. One can only imagine Kathy's surprise when, on her wedding day, she discovered who Petrus really was. There is no official record of her reaction, although rumor has it that Kathy wasn't too happy initially. But this story has a plot twist that Queen Catherine could never have imagined, and this plot twist is the cheesiest of them all: love. Like in the Disney fairy tale, Beauty, aka Kathy, found that true love was hidden way deep beneath the surface, and that Petrus's exterior appearance was only a small aspect of who he was. Perhaps Queen Catherine could never have imagined that the real Beauty and the Beast would be married for nearly 40 years. They would even have children. Nobody knew if the couple's children would be born with Petrus's condition, so it was a surprise when their first child was born without it. The couple had 7 children in total, and 4 of them did inherit Petrus's hypertrichosis. The Gonçalves family became a huge attraction in France's court. They became known as the Wild Family and spent the rest of their lives touring through Europe. Natural scientists were interested in studying the Gonçalves children, trying to better understand the ones born with hypertrichosis. Many portraits were painted of the family during the years they toured the European continent, but many say that they were always seen as an attraction rather than regular human beings. This makes one wonder, did Petrus and Kathy get their happy ending? We know that all Disney movie characters live happily ever after. But how true was that for the real-life Beauty and the Beast? Records were so fascinated with figuring out if Petrus was human or a wild man that there is not much about his life beyond that fact. In the original tale that inspired the movie, Beauty and the Beast also find a happy ending. Written by Gabrielle Suzanne Villeneuve in 1740, the original tale is said to be inspired by Petrus and Cathy's story. But maybe this tale is really as old as time and was born even before Petrus. You see, historians have collected over 23 variations of the Beauty and the Beast story around the world, and over 162 versions of the animal bridegroom story archetype. If this word doesn't mean anything to you, let's take a step back for a second. Fairy tales usually follow some archetypal structure. This means that they tend to reflect the human psyche as a way for us to understand some of our behaviors and feelings. In fact, some fairy tales should be called just tales, as there is nothing fairy-like about them. If you've ever read The Brothers Grimm or Hans Christian Andersen, you know what I mean. The animal bridegroom story trope usually shows a woman marrying an animal-like human that turns out to be a prince living under a curse. And some say this trope dates all the way back to the 1500s. The Disney movie never sets a historical date for the Beauty and the Beast story. From the outfits worn, some people say it's set around the 1700s, which would be the epoch that Villeneuve's tale represents, rather than Petrus's time period. All we know is that if this was inspired by the Gonsalves family life, Villeneuve twisted quite a few things. If in the movie, Belle breaks the beast's curse with the power of true love, in real life, that's not what happened to Petrus. There was no evil witch cursing him. He would never be able to get rid of his condition. The turning point of this story would be if society would have accepted him as he was, and perhaps never have called him a beast to begin with.
How do you prepare for a long trip? You probably look up the route on Google Maps or watch a walkthrough on YouTube. Or maybe you ask someone who's been there recently. But what if you're bound for a place humans have never existed? Yes, I'm talking about our next-door neighbor, the Red Planet. NASA is planning a mission to Mars in the late 2030s or early 2040s. That's too far in the future, so why start preparing now? Well, it's closer than you think. Rookie astronauts spend at least 2 years training just to go out in space. For every hour they spend in space, they need to spend 10 hours underwater on Earth. This training only applies to spacewalks and the International Space Station. So far, some 600 people have been to space, but humans have never set foot on Mars. Traveling to this planet will require a different kind of training. Is there a region of Earth that closely resembles Mars? The Apollo mission's astronauts trained in Nevada. This is where Neil Armstrong and his fellow astronauts got a sense of what the surface of the moon would feel like. But Mars is different from the moon. It has gravity and an atmosphere. In this aspect, it resembles our own planet. Just one country, to be more precise: Iceland. NASA used this island in the far north of Europe as a testing ground for its 2020 Mars mission. And no, the mission didn't involve humans landing on the Red Planet. Just a small rover looking for signs of life. But the high-tech robot still needs some practice. Let's do a little test of our own. Compare the landscapes on Mars and Iceland. Are you struggling to spot the difference? Good. That means that scientists have picked the ideal training grounds for the upcoming Mars mission. An area entirely barren and devoid of life. That's how one researcher involved in the mission described Iceland. And this description perfectly matches the conditions future astronauts will encounter on Mars. But what's so special about Iceland? There are valleys that were created by volcanic eruptions. The island is still young in geological terms. Simply put, it's still forming. Lava flows, water, volcanoes, raging winds. Iceland has it all. The country's slogan is the land of fire and ice. The island's population is just above 350,000. For comparison, the city of Cleveland in Ohio has more residents than the entire country of Iceland. But the size doesn't always matter. Remember Euro 2016? When England lost to Iceland 2-1, their players became stars overnight, but Icelanders are closer to the stars than you think.
The country has a space agency. Yeah, you heard it correctly. Now, this agency actually consists of two people who are trying to promote Iceland as a terrestrial analog to Mars. In short, this means that Iceland looks a lot like the Red Planet. The local duo wants to get space scientists to choose Iceland as a training ground for future astronauts. Their biggest argument is that it's cheaper. Sending people and equipment into space is expensive. Duh! According to Elon Musk, SpaceX launches cost around $2 million. That's way less than a typical NASA launch. A large portion of space research takes place back on Earth. Antarctica is ideal for studying cold and desolate places in outer space. Hawaii is perfect for exploring lava tubes and the composition of rocks. Just imagine the logistics behind going to both of these regions at the same time. This is where Iceland comes into play. It has diverse habitats that are relatively close to each other. So what exactly will future Mars-bound astronauts do in Iceland? To answer this question, let's travel back in time. Nevada wasn't the only place NASA's astronauts visited more than half a century ago. They prepared for walking on the surface of the moon in Iceland too. Their primary objective was collecting rock samples. These can mainly be found near volcanoes and lava fields, and Iceland has plenty of those. Around 60% of the local landscape is rocky and rugged. This makes the island the size of Kentucky feel like another planet. Add that to the fact that 80% of Iceland is uninhabited, and you get the perfect playground for astronauts. And there's another similarity with Mars. In summer, it can seem as if the sun never sets in Iceland. Locals go shopping at 3 a.m. In June, for example, the night can last only 2 hours. Sounds like a perfect open-air party destination. Well, not really. Who would want to party at a freezing temperature of 42 degrees Fahrenheit? That's the average low air temperature in June. Future astronauts spent weeks in Iceland, trying to adjust to these strange conditions. This helps them prepare for the long days on Mars. This is not a figure of speech, since days on the Red Planet are longer than the ones on Earth by 40 minutes. That's not much, considering the length of days on other planets. On Jupiter, a day is over in just under 10 hours, while a day on Venus equals 243 Earth days. But let's first land on Mars and then think of other planets, shall we? Have you been doing some math in your head? If one day on Mars is 40 minutes longer than on Earth, then how long is a Martian year? Nope, I'm willing to bet your calculations aren't correct. You forgot to factor in an important detail. The planet is farther from the Sun than Earth. This means that a year on Mars lasts 687 days, nearly twice as long as a year on Earth. Sorry, future astronauts, you'll get a birthday cake once every 2 years. There's another minus to the Red Planet, literally. The planet's average temperature is minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Makes Iceland's climate feel like the tropics, huh? Despite these extreme weather conditions, scientists believe that water once flowed on Mars. And where there's water, there's life. That's why NASA scientists lowered the tiny rover in the middle of a crater that they suspected was once a lake. This is where it stands the greatest chance of finding evidence of life. What about life forms on Mars? Looks like it's not science fiction. The planet has polar caps like Earth, and that's not all. Scientists believe they've even detected snowfall on Mars. Its atmosphere is 100 times thinner than that of our planet. It isn't a breath of fresh air, but it isn't extremely inhospitable like other planets. On Venus, it rains acid, and the temperature is high enough to melt lead. And on Jupiter, there are gigantic storms that rage on for centuries. Makes you fall in love with the blue planet all over again. Even Iceland sounds fun at this point. You might even want to learn Icelandic. If you're successful, then you can even read Old Norse, the language of the Vikings. And you'll know 100 words for wind. This will come in handy as wind speeds on the island can reach up to 40 miles per hour. Out in the open, you have to hold on to a fence or a signpost to stay on your feet. Iceland's climate will make you think twice before moving there. But for astronauts preparing for another world, this place is perfect. Iceland is equally impressive underground. In fact, the island might hold the key to sustaining human life on Mars. The surface of this planet is not very hospitable. The soil is poisonous and abrasive. It can easily cut through an astronaut's suit. But underneath the ground, the living conditions are more tolerable. And Iceland has a real-life model of this potential underground dwelling: lava tubes. Long tunnels carved out by lava making its way to the surface. These maze-like corridors are perfect human habitats. And they're cost-efficient. Nature had already built them for us. Future astronauts can walk through similar lava tubes in Iceland. Who knows? One day their cautious steps might turn into giant leaps for mankind.